You're listening to a 58 Ember production.
Welcome to Sky Talkers. Here are your hosts, Charlotte and Caitlin.
Hello, and welcome to Sky Talkers. I'm your host, Charlotte.
Hey, everyone. I'm your other host, Caitlin, and welcome to our series finale discussion of Andor, Season 2, Episodes 10, 11, and 12. We are here finally at the finale, and I'm really sad. I'm really sad. This was such an excellent set of episodes on an incredible season, and I think this was kind of a perfect finale.
Of a perfect show, honestly. I feel like I've been sitting with this for a couple days now, and personally, I have just been really reflecting on the journey of Rogue One, actually like the Disney purchase to Rogue One, to the show's announcement, to seasons 1 and 2. And I just feel like it has been such an amazing journey. And I've just been reflecting on the fact that I feel like Rogue One as a movie was such a bold decision from Disney right out the gate, right after The Force Awakens. Their, I don't know, their prized possession as they go right out the gate with this new era of Star Wars. And Rogue One comes along a year after The Force Awakens and is something completely new and different. Fans really attached to it. And later now we have this series that was announced in, I think, 2020, right? Around a prequel for Cassian and Andor. And just this like journey that we've been on throughout all of those big pieces. And I just really feel like it's actually one of the boldest, maybe if not the boldest thing that Star Wars in this era has ever done. And I just don't want to take for granted that like they did a prequel that goes right up to the class, like 1977 Star Wars, and changed the way that we see Star Wars. And then we now have a series that changes the way we see Rogue One and therefore Star Wars, and makes the impact so much more important. And I feel like they nailed it. It's the boldest thing. And it gets a 10 out of 10 for me. It's perfect.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I've been thinking a lot about with kind of the lead-in from the finale of Andor into Rogue One into A New Hope is that it really just ups the tension of everything that ends up happening in A New Hope, because you really get an appreciation for just how little time actually passes from the end of Andor into A New Hope, and that all of these people are really in a pressure cooker of information that is being given to them and the decisions that they're making, and it's all or nothing for all of them and for the rebellion and the galaxy. And I think that has been such a great thing for this particular story of, if the end point of the story is blowing up the Death Star in A New Hope, of, all of these pieces that come together to really show just how incredible all of these characters are and how devoted they are to the cause with all the decisions that they're making, quite literally like through gut instinct and on the drop of a hat, and choosing to believe the information that they're given and move forward with it, which I think is really what we start to see everyone doing here in the finale, and then obviously throughout Rogue One and then into A New Hope too.
Yeah, I think that by A New Hope, you see Yavin, and you know how many decisions happened and sacrifices happened to get to that one place. It's crazy. It's crazy. It really does change the way I think about the rebellion, which I just wasn't expecting. Even though I should have expected that, but I didn't. And now I don't know. I don't know. I feel like everyone was saying, I think it was Tony who was saying it, was Diego who was saying it, that you're going to view Rogue One so differently now. And I think we were all bracing ourselves for how that's going to change. And I was really excited for it. And now it just makes it even more devastating, which I didn't think was possible. Everything about Rogue One is just so heartbreaking now. The last hour of that movie is so emotional, and it's even more, I don't even know. I think my new favorite trilogy might be Andor, Rogue One, A New Hope. Like, it's crazy. Or you could even do Revenge of the Sith and/or Rogue One. That's crazy. There's so much. It just changes so much.
Star Wars is tragedy, baby, and this
Mhm.
is really where it comes to life in the biggest way.
I know. It's so nuts. It's so nuts.
It's so sad.
I know.
I
I
don't
know.
think I had really the first time I watched it, the finale, I obviously cried, but I think, and we've talked about this before, like the first time you watch new Star Wars, there's like a first watch anxiety almost, that because you don't know what's going to happen. I feel like sometimes, at least for me, like the emotions don't hit as hard the first time, but then on the next watch, it was like just tears, crying, full on, like sobbing, sitting on my couch. I was like, this is the whole last 10 minutes of the finale of just, seeing all of our characters and where we leave them as Cassian takes off for Kafrene. It's Star Wars' tragedy. It was quite literally almost too much.
Yeah. It really is. It's so much. So when we watched the finale, I was freaking out. You were watching it at the same time, and I just felt like, oh my God, literally everything has changed. And I was like, I immediately need to see the beginning of Rogue One. I need to see how that has changed. And because I have purposely not watched I guess I watched it on the plane to Japan. Okay. But I fell asleep during it. Like, it was a movie I put on. It doesn't count. It was a movie I put on to comfort watch and doze in and out,
Right.
But I really purposely haven't watched it in like a serious way in a long time, because I really wanted to wait until we finished Andor. And because of that, I just didn't remember the specifics of what
The conversation.
the conversation of Cassian when he gets to the Ring of Kafrene, and like all those pieces and everything. And oh my God, it fits together so well. It is so crazy. I was like almost like jumping on my bed. I was so excited. Like the way, the intonation in which Diego says Galen Erso, when the contact is like, yeah, Galen Erso, there's spies everywhere and everything. And you hear that in Andor, that there really are spies from the rebellion in Saw's partisans.
Mhm.
And I loved that line of, I think it was Draven who's like, well, he's not crazy. Saw. He's not crazy. We do have spies all over, and he knows.
Yeah.
I thought that was so good. But regardless, like this beginning here, it really did sync up so perfectly. They really nailed it. And I think that beginning, we've talked about it so much on this freaking podcast, right? About how it shocked you in the theaters and everything. And it's funny because it doesn't shock me anymore. It doesn't shock me at all. And how we were waiting to see how that was going to go. Like, does it feel in character with the Cassian that we know in the Andor series to you now?
I think it feels in character with like what's going on at the time, and the fact that like hearing Tivik say Galen Erso, I think immediately confirms fully for Cassian everything that Luthen said, which I think Cassian believes it, but I think that's part of what he is like trying to explain to the alliance, all of our rebellion leaders, of like, Luthen got this intel, like even if it isn't true, Luthen obviously believes it is, and so it's worth, like, for everything that he's done, it's worth looking into, at least. Even though I think Cassian believes it, I think that's the pitch he's kind of trying to make to, like Bail, for example. But I think in that moment, and like later when Draven comes to Cassian and is like, Tivik won't speak to anyone else, if this is a trap, this is like a brilliant way to spring it. Like, we know there are Imperial starfighters on Jeddah. Like, it seems like some of these pieces are clicking together. And I think for Cassian, hearing Tivik say Galen Erso was like, okay, all of this is real. This is all true. This is the most important thing now. And it makes sense for him to get rid of Tivik when there's no other way. It's still hard because Cassian has been like everything with Kleya, where he keeps saying, I'm not leaving you here. I'm not leaving you here. I think is so great, and I think lines up perfectly with with Jyn as well, Jyn and Cassian's relationship in Rogue One. So listen, it's not shocking, but it's still like, wow. I think I still am just always going to feel that emotion of the first time I watched Rogue One. and
Mhm.
seeing him do that.
I think after Cassian had, when there was the extraction of Mon Mothma out of Coruscant, and he's just like shooting who's ever in his way
Yeah,
on Cor, like that lines up
that's true.
perfectly
It
with
does.
the Cassian that we see right away in Rogue One.
Yeah.
Also, another note is I only watched like a little bit of Rogue One, but when he comes back, when K2 and Cassian and Melshi come back with Jin to Yavin, Cassian makes a note to K2 to be like, make sure they know they were coming in on a stolen ship. Make sure they know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God.
They just went through this.
Yes, they just went through it and it was really scary.
That's funny. Yeah, I put on Rogue One too, but I just watched up through Tivik and then I turned it off.
I mean,
But
there's so much.
yeah, there's so much. There's so much. But
Yeah.
we should start at the beginning of this arc, episode 10. We've made it to BBY1. When that showed up on the screen, I was like, okay.
I know. It's like, oh my God, it's freaking over.
happening.
It's over. It's so over.
It's so over.
Yeah.
But we start in the gallery and they are getting an emergency message, basically. We get to see Kleya in PJ Kleya variant. And as we know, it's Lonnie who is calling for one last meeting with Luthen. And there's this like really sad kind of foreboding scene between Kleya and Luthen here at the beginning where she's telling him to be really careful if things don't look right. She says, if it doesn't look perfect, tell me you'll leave. And Luthen says, I think we used up all the perfect. And there's just this kind of lingering sad smile almost from Kleya. And it just really, again, it's foreboding. It's ominous. We know things have to come to a head here. And they do. The conversation between Lonnie and Luthen is pretty intense because Lonnie has been doing some spy work on the side himself, which I'll be honest, the first time I watched this, I was having a hard time keeping up with like, wait, what? Where did he get this information? Wait, what? And then later with Dedra and Krennic and her code cert, I was like, wait a second. So Lonnie has just been like snooping through all of Dedra's stuff for over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And Dedra herself has been snooping through Imperial stuff that she shouldn't be for a while now too. I was like, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I wasn't that confused about it, honestly, but I think on second watch, I was more like, oh, Dedra's really gotten herself into a lot of trouble. Like, obviously, I understand why Lonnie was doing that because, of course, but Dedra, I feel like it's very clear to me that she, and I know we'll get there, but it's clear to me that after Cyril has died, that she's trying to cling to whatever she possibly can to have something to focus on, I think. Honestly, like I feel like she is very much alone. And something that I really thought about in these 3 episodes is, oh, she has no one. She has no friends.
Yeah.
No support system. Her boss, like, there's no like managerial support for her. And we laugh at that, but there's a lot of ways that Dedra's experience within the ISB is very reflective of like workplace drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes her like part of what makes her character so interesting and sort of sympathetic in a lot of ways. And I think that her rifling through information that she shouldn't be, I think if she was perhaps in a more powerful position, I don't think it would have been, I don't think she would have ended up in literal prison for that.
Well, and I think she was always just looking for Luthen.
Exactly. She was just always looking for Luthen, always looking for access. So
stumbled across the Death Star.
Yep. Stumbled across the Death Star.
Oh.
It's not great, of course, but she has literally no support system. So again, just to go back to the conversation with Luthen and Lonnie, I was so stressed about what was happening on that bench that I had no idea if this was where, like, was Lonnie going to be Luthen's end? I didn't know where that was going to go because he was so anxious about it all. And then it was very clear that, oh, there's actually no happy ending for Lonnie here and his family, I guess. I hope that the wife and daughter got out okay, but I doubt it.
Yeah. I thought this whole scene was the tension, I think, throughout these 3 episodes was kind of insane to me, particularly episode 10 and 11 with Kleya trying to get to Luthen and then the rescue of Kleya off of Coruscant. I thought I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. But
Yeah.
Lonnie says that he's been burned, and he's figured it out what everything is about. Obviously, he's learned about the Death Star because he's had Dedra's code cert for over a year now, and he spent something like 3 hours looking through all of it the night before. And he basically tells Luthen that they must not have realized it yet, or else they would all be after me right now. A crazy detail I thought in here was that he says Yularen wasn't even told until a month ago, and then Krennic has been building this for over a decade, which we know Krennic has been working on this for a long time, but Yularen didn't even know.
Mhm.
And I also thought it was kind of crazy that Luthen does tell. I mean, I think at this point in the conversation, Luthen has already decided he's going to kill Lonnie, but he does tell Lonnie that they'll go to Yavin.
Yeah.
And
It's like at what point he's bargaining almost with real information to the point where that's when you know it's desperate, right? And that's
yeah.
when you know that he's probably going to die, because I felt like there was no way that he would actually outright tell him.
Yeah.
And we know that Luthen's not going to Yavin either.
Yeah. It's just all these little crazy choices when you think about the end result of the Death Star being blown up is, I guess the root of it is Dedra looking for Luthen. And because of that, she's getting information that she doesn't really have clearance for, some by accident, some that she goes searching for, not to look for the Death Star, of course, but that's what she ends up coming across. And then Luthen, or Lonnie, gets her code cert, all of her passwords, finds this out, tells Luthen, who tells Kleya, who tells Cassian, who tells everyone. I don't know. It's really crazy when you think about this this game of telephone, this giant game of telephone that happens, and it basically goes back to Dedra. At least in this version of the story, I think there's a way that the way that Andor is kind of set up, it's like the world that they've built and like the types of characters and the way that they've told this story, and particularly like Nemec's manifesto about small steps forward by lots of people everywhere, is what's going to move the needle basically in this rebellion against the Empire. And so I think that there are probably a lot of other holes in what's happening in the Empire where information is getting leaked, right? Perhaps even about the Death Star to other people and other versions of the story. But because I think that kind of goes to what Partagaz and that other Imperial guy talk about when they're listening to Nemec's manifesto, which my jaw was on the floor.
That was an insane scene. We'll get there. We'll get there.
But I do think that when we're looking at like our story and the POV that we have, it's really insane that this leak ultimately comes from Dedra, who was so committed to the Empire, and then
too committed, lost it all, got chaotic after.
Yeah, lost it, and was imprisoned by the end. I don't know if it's on Narkina 5, but same thing.
Looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think two things. Have you seen those memes about how that one police officer in like the first episode of Andor that told Cyril to back off following Cassian? It was probably just a little bit of an issue.
The wrong guy.
Yeah, there's no need to go down this road. It just seems like too much trouble, and it's just like a bad situation, so whatever. And then Cyril follows it. It's like, have you ever seen those memes that are like the domino effect of that guy saying, don't do it?
Well, it's like it's that guy went on a work conference or something like that, and suddenly the Death Star is blown up.
The Death Star is blown up. Yeah, the domino effect of how that started it, and then now Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's fully insane. But yeah, it's all these little choices that people make and the domino effect of where it leads all of them.
Yeah. Well, the second thing I was going to say is, speaking to you being like, oh, we're seeing this thread of just one thing leads to another, and that's the characters that we're introduced to, and this is the story, and there's definitely probably some more pieces elsewhere. Even Mon Mothma, when presented with the information from Cassian, is like, well, duh, the energy program is a front. There was no checks, and she doesn't say duh, but she said, well, obviously.
Mon Mothma didn't say duh.
She basically says obviously, though. She was like, there was no checks, there was none of that, so of course it was a front. It just was a question mark. What was a front for? So I'm sure that there were other people just like Mon who were interested in figuring that out and maybe got close or didn't. You never know.
Yeah. But I think these characters like Lonnie become such fan favorites, and it's crazy that we like Robert Ems is the actor who plays Lonnie, and we don't like he hasn't been on press tour or anything like that. Like we haven't really heard directly about him, but his character is so important and he's done such a great job playing this character for the past 2 seasons. And I don't know. And I feel the same way like about like Supervisor Hurt. I think he was incredible and like the journey his character has gone on to play like a pretty big role here in, especially in the finale, but in the back half of season 2 and seeing how he's kind of risen in the ranks. Just so many great players in this show.
Supervisor here has an interesting name, right? When you have the subtitles on, it looks like it spells heart, but when you say it, it like sounds like hurt.
Yeah.
Which is just one of those things where you're like, oh, I think that with the and/or of the ambiguity that is played with a lot in this show Andor, in the beginning of this series, I felt like maybe I would like this character, Supervisor Heert, right? Because he was working for Dedra. He was kind of like a brown noser, kind of.
But they were friends. He was
they
like,
were
I'll
friends.
stay late with you. We'll figure this out together.
Exactly. And then by the end, they have that devastating conversation where they're not friends anymore, right? But he's evil. He's pure evil by the end, right? And he's been sucked up into the Imperial war machine, and you know it's not going to end well for him. It doesn't. And he's like literally a shield for K2SO, which was a crazy scene. Yeah. But I think just sort of phonetically, when you say Supervisor Hurt, like he's gonna hurt people.
Yeah.
But then when you read it, you're like, oh, maybe he's Supervisor Hart. Maybe it's not.
We changed one of those E's to an A.
Yeah. And I don't know. That seems so simple, but oftentimes names in Star Wars are super obvious. And in fact, this is a good segue actually to talk a little bit about Luthen's name, because I think we had talked a lot about what was going to happen to Luthen and whether or not he would become a martyr and what was going to go down with Dedra and him. And we did get a standoff in the gallery, and we did get a Luthen dying basically in the gallery and killing himself. But I think what precedes him stabbing himself in the stomach when Dedra's not looking is this conversation they're play acting, right? I think Dedra has a motive, Luthen has a motive, Luthen's stalling, Dedra's playing dumb. And when Luthen is talking about, Dedra asks what's real and what's not in here. Are they all real? Are they fakes? And isn't that the whole question about everything, right? What's real? What's not? What's real information? What's fake information? Who can you trust? And Luthen goes to grab that dagger that's, I think, Mon Cala, and talks it through about, I think maybe it's a fake, maybe it's not. And he stabs himself with that. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the object is a dagger, and he's able to stab himself with it. Doesn't matter if it's real or not. No, it was a weapon and he used it. But his last name is Rael, which is just one letter off from real. And I think that's meaningful in some way, right? It's not exact, but it is real. And he was the real deal in terms of a rebellion leader. And he's not going to be remembered as such, only by a couple of characters. Yeah. Did you have any thoughts about the whole conversation about what's real and what's not?
Yeah, I thought it was a great conversation. Firstly, I gasped when Dedra was standing outside the gallery. Like, as soon as Luthen went back by himself, I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, I know.
She's coming. She is coming. And when she turns around, I think you're right to describe, like, their whole conversation was play acting. But yeah, I think there's something really fascinating about the idea of what is faked and what is real, what is pretending, what is a facade. And this has come up a couple different times, specifically in regards to the gallery and the antiquities, right? Like everything with Davo, that was the whole issue, I guess 2 arcs ago, was he got sold fakes. And it created this whole plot line of having to get the listening device out of the antiquities because they were going to have all of the antiquities checked to see if they were real. And then even in the first arc with the Shandy Merle big statue, that if that one was real, there are only 12 or whatever that have ever been found in the galaxy. And but the thing is, it's like it's all a facade. And it's that moment in this conversation with Dedra and Luthen when the facades finally drop. And, she says, "You disgust me." And he says, she says, "You don't want freedom, you want chaos." And then Luthen says, "You're too late. The rebellion isn't here anymore. It's flown away," which I love that phrasing.
Loved that.
Yeah.
Especially thinking about the symbol of the phoenix that comes into play with the rebellion as as their symbol, and just the concept of it flying away. It definitely, that was the nest, of course, but the imagery of a bird, I think, was so intriguing.
Yeah, I agree. He says, "The rebellion isn't here anymore. It's flown away. It's everywhere now. There's a whole galaxy waiting to disgust you," which wonderful phrasing. And then when, they're talking about the blade, I just loved Stellan Skarsgård's delivery here, where, she asks, "Oh, well, do we know, is the blade real?" And he says, "We still don't know. The tension mounts." And his delivery was so great. And I think that also really kind of speaks to, we still don't really know who Luthen is. We, of course, have flashbacks of him in this episode with a young Kleya. He was in the military doing something, but we don't even know if that's his real name, actually, because what he tells Kleya is, "I'm Luthen, now you're Kleya. And if it's useful, you can be my daughter. Everything else is up for grabs." So we still don't really know who he is. He's this enigma who started the rebellion in a lot of ways and was a very influential piece in getting them to Yavin, but his real name is unknown. His identity is unknown.
Yeah, he's unreal, but the rebellion and what he's created is real.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I thought, we said last week that Dedra's story, similar to Cyril's beginning and ending with Cassian, would also likely begin and end with Luthen. And the fact that she brings the Imperial Star Path to the gallery, it's like, girl.
I remember talking about that 2 years ago too, Caitlin. I don't know if you remember this, and being like, that's going to have to come back around. The fact that they left that there, it was a thing.
Yeah.
Where Cassian was like, "Don't we have to go back for that?" And God, it wasn't that staging was so cool with those big chains in that room. I miss that. I'm so nostalgic for it already. And then they didn't go back, and Luthen was like, "Forget it. We'll just get out. Forget it."
Yeah. That was the choice that needed to be made, though, at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it bought them enough time, obviously.
6 years.
But
yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time. Yeah. Yeah. I just thought this whole scene was incredible. And I really like that it was Luthen's choice to use the blade. I think we had all kind of thought that our discussion last week had been that Dedra would kill Luthen, or like maybe it would happen from Kleya or something like that. But the fact that it's just that Kleya's not there, I think was also a really good call, actually, for her not to be witness to this, because it is at this point that, again, like the facade has dropped from Luthen once she brings out the Star Path. I think he knows from the beginning when she gets there, because, right, Lonnie had said, she's still looking for you. I think they're finally on to you, this whole thing. He knows as soon as he opens the door that the gig is up. The fact that he destroys all of the radios and everything there too, but even before she gets there. Just a fantastic scene between the two of them.
We'd be remiss to not talk about, Caitlin, the fact that we got a Lothcat in Andor.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Not to just like bring up the levity, but I feel like
the levity of the Lothcat finding the dead body.
Yeah.
Okay.
A Lothcat on a leash. I think that was a new vibe.
Yeah. Merle could never.
No, never. I don't think so.
No.
But anyway, I thought that was really interesting. And then the shot of Luthen digesting the information when he's on the steps after, like walking down the steps, it was like almost a Dutch angle. God, the cinematography and production design of this series is just insane, and I'm going to miss it so much.
Yeah.
So much.
Him telling Kleya everything that he's heard in the middle of this staircase with all these people going around them, the most important information. And it's just in this, and that's, of course, like you hide in plain sight kind of thing. And it's just crazy. And he's having Kleya repeat back this information. And again, it's just a huge game of telephone to get to the rebellion and what they end up doing with that information. The tension begins immediately.
Maybe now's a good time to talk a little bit about the father-daughter relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like we've never talked about this. I feel like we've never speculated on whether or not Kleya was Luthen's daughter or not.
I don't think we have.
And it seems like a little bit of a miss for us. Feels like something we would have done. But I don't know. I just felt like maybe they were both. I guess I was feeling what was real in the story, which is they are undefined, and they are father and daughter in moments that matter, I guess. And I guess this just made me think a lot about how the show is so unconcerned with labels, and it's just concerned with the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And how we spent some time talking about, well, are Cass and Bix actually married? Are they husband and wife? Bix refers to Cassian as husband a couple times. Do we believe that? Is that just a front? It just doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? Because in their brain they are, and their relationship, they were together and loved each other. And I think I would say the same thing about Luthen and Kleya too. How unbelievably devastating that ultimately Kleya does have to kill Luthen. And when she kisses him when he's dead, that was so emotional. And I was like, you guys are father-daughter. They've been through so much together. And I think that scene, even on the steps when Luthen is telling everything to Kleya around what they have to do, there was so much love there, I think.
Yeah, I think their relationship was incredibly nuanced from the very beginning too, that
Yes.
she's hiding on this ship. He finds her. They start bartering. We're seeing kind of the beginning of his antiquities trade, I guess. But the big takeaway I had too was just, again, how we still don't really know that much about how they even started on this, because I'll be honest, the first time I watched this episode, I was like, I don't know if I really needed Kleya to have been with Luthen since she was like a small child. But then on second watch, I was like, no, I think I'm really glad we have this backstory, because I'm really glad how it's still pretty ambiguous, honestly. Going to what I was saying earlier about, like, we still don't really even have Luthen's real name. I think that it's great to have these things still kind of shrouded in mystery. I think it's really fitting for the character of Luthen. But I think it was really great seeing how big a role Kleya plays, especially throughout this season, to see some of this origin story for her. And particularly on, I guess, the first planet we see them bartering on, when she sees the prisoners being led away, and Luthen leaves her there. And when she sees all the prisoners lined up on the wall, she doesn't look away. And I think that that's such an important facet of Kleya's character. I think we all know her to be like very serious, very stoic. She's got like a sarcastic edge to her, but she doesn't look away. And she's not going to back down. And I think that this all, like, we're seeing the beginning of this in this flashback. And what I love about it is that it's her making that choice. Luthen tells her to leave in that moment, and she chooses not to, and she chooses not to look away as well. Luthen didn't really have anything to do with that in that moment, but she asks him in the next scene, when do we start fighting back? And he says, we have. And we're not, obviously, as the audience, I don't think we're really clued in yet to what what his plan is at this point, or what he's kind of doing, or how the events of the first scene were kind of the last straw for him. We just kind of see him crashing out about it, when he's saying, like, make it stop. But we don't really see how long he's been doing it, what he's been asked to do. Like, we don't see any of that, and we don't need to, because we're seeing the impact of it on him in that moment. But I think, like, right now we're just seeing kind of like these connections, I guess, being made as he's starting to travel around and sell things and talk to people and get intel. But he tells Kleya, we fight to win. And that means we lose and lose and lose and lose until we're ready. All you know now is how much you hate. You bank that, you hide that. Keep it alive until you know what to do with it. And when I tell you to move, you move.
Yeah, I think that when Luthen walks away from her wanting to watch the firing squad, that to me is the last time that Kleya doesn't listen to him about something like that. I think that she had to see that. She wanted to look at the explosion, but when they're on, I guess that's Naboo. I don't know. It looks like Naboo. It looks like Italy. So
Feels like Naboo.
Feels like Naboo. Shaped like Naboo. I feel like it was Naboo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Luthen's like, don't look at the explosion, or you want to pull the trigger. I'll pull the trigger. He does it eventually. But they can't look at it because then it'll be suspicious that they were the ones
obvious.
doing it. Yeah. So, but I think that was truly the last time that she broke from him, personally.
I think so too. I wouldn't be surprised, because I think at that point I would feel like she feels like they're on equal footing after that, as she's like starting to learn. She knows that Luthen has a plan, or has a goal that he's working towards, you know, when he says we are fighting back. So I really liked the flashback the more I watched it and like thought about it from my initial watch. And I was really glad that we had it, especially kind of juxtaposed with what Kleya is doing in the present tense as she's trying to infiltrate the hospital. Which I gotta also, to bring up the levity a little bit, this little alien that Kleya is wheeling around.
Oh my God, Granny.
Yeah.
I loved her so much.
I hope she's okay.
The gurgling. I hope she's okay too. I feel like she is.
She's got to be. She's just like swinging her feet. The wheelchair is like too big for her.
Singing a little bit.
Yeah, a little ditty. It was.
Yeah.
It was
we
great.
love Granny.
Yeah.
Granny going up the elevator. I loved that. I also loved Kleya's yellow scrubs. Very like the butter yellow, very on trend. Very nice.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to think that, after Kleya leaves Luthen, she has next to no speaking lines the rest of the episode. She just has a few when she's trying to get past one of the stormtroopers, but otherwise there's no speaking. Like the acting from Elizabeth DeLau, I think DeLau, her last name. She just did such an incredible job. And I think that we've already kind of touched on it, but the scene when she does kill Luthen in the hospital, it's just such a perfect way, I think, to end their relationship, the way that there's no hesitation from Kleya. There's no preamble, no last words, no like lingering looks really before she does it. She just kind of goes in and immediately does what needs to be done. And he dies. And that's what he would have wanted her to do.
I had some hope that she was going to break him out.
Oh, really?
It was a small hope.
Yeah.
I was sort of like, oh, she's going to the hospital. And then I realized, oh, she understands the weight and the need for his sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're keeping him alive by a machine, that cannot happen.
Yeah. He can't be kept alive.
He cannot be kept alive if he was in their custody. So I had sort of hoped that maybe based off of, I don't know, the medical advancements on Coruscant, that maybe he would be able to get off and go to Yavin in the future. But no, I realized that was it. And I think just the fact that Kleya was there for that, I think was so meaningful. And then it really did, I think it obviously like fully breaks her up in the next 2 episodes.
Yeah.
She is so messed up from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really does hammer home that their relationship really was father-daughter. We don't know much about them, but I think this episode serves as their relationship is complicated. You can think about it as father-daughter if that helps you define the love between them and what they were willing to, sacrifice for each other and work towards for a rebellion. And I think just to answer a question from the last episode, he's never going to be seen as a martyr, but she had to ensure that his sacrifice was worth it. And then Cassian later says, like, he made it worth it.
Yeah, I think there are people that do view him like that. Cassian does. Will does. Kleya does.
Maybe Vel.
Yeah, maybe Vel. Yeah, maybe. I think maybe.
But I don't think it's not spread. Maybe Mon sort of will acknowledge a little bit that he really was the reason why they were on Yavin in the first place.
Yeah.
Or why Yavin was built out, maybe not why they were on Yavin, but it's just a lot. I felt like this episode was so special and really brilliant, and I'm just really happy that we had this Luthen and Kleya episode. And personally, I just feel like it's going to go under the radar a little bit based off of the way that these I don't know if we were on a weekly schedule or something with these episodes, I think this one would be really, really talked about. But we're recording this before because we have screeners. We're recording this on May 11th. And I'm just making a prediction that I feel like this episode is going to be a sleeper hit a little bit for some people.
Yeah, I mean,
because I think more people are going to be talking about the finale.
I think, yeah, when these episodes first come out, it's going to be all about the finale and, leading into Rogue One, I think, as is appropriate. But yeah, with time, I think this one will definitely kind of rise to the top. I think it's great because it's wholly about kind of newly introduced characters in Kleya and Luthen. Not Cassian's not even in the episode. You know what I mean? And I think you just get to really appreciate how fleshed out and how nuanced these characters have been that were created for this show.
Absolutely. Also, the stakes are really high for both of them, right? We know where some of our characters go, but we don't know what's going on for either of them. So the question of does Kleya get out and does or not was the through line throughout these 3 episods to me.
Yeah, totally. And
that was the tension.
I was like, she can't die. Her pair already died.
I know. It's so true.
We talked about. She can't die.
Nope.
I was like, obviously Tony can't do that.
I was thinking so much about pairs, and I was going to save this for later, but I'm just going to say it now since we're talking about it. Yeah, so we've talked so much, obviously, about how we have our pairs, and our pairs keep getting split up, right? Even Bix and Cassian, and then eventually Cassian will die, and our pair is gone. But now Bix has a new pair with a baby.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, great. Fantastic.
She's okay. She's safe.
Yeah.
With B2 as well.
With B2.
I said that last week too. I was like, she's with B2. She's with B2. And anyway, we'll get there.
We have to get there. But I think that was so lovely, and just I don't know. The pair conversation really made me overthink some things. So
I think it's been a really helpful way to think about the season and watching all of them making specific choices, whether to stay together or to separate, or when the choices are taken away from them as well.
Yeah.
One thing we don't want to gloss over is that Dedra does get arrested in this episode by Hirt at the hospital. And it's another moment of these two are they're enemies at this point. And
they go from friends to frenemies to pure enemies.
Yeah. And Dedra has put everything onto Luthen and Axis, and it was her downfall in the end, as I think a lot of us knew it would be. So
my takeaway from these 3 episodes, and we knew this, okay? I just want to be very clear about this, but I think the show does an amazing job of displaying this, and that is there's no winning in the Empire unless you are Emperor Palpatine. Within the systems, no matter how far you rise, we even see it with Krennic. At the end of Andor, we're like, Krennic is the big boss, right? He has been working on the Death Star.
Well, I don't think so, because some people make comments about. He even makes a comment like, "Has my reputation fallen so low?"
Oh yeah, for sure.
That I'm
for sure. But I do think that he's cockier in Andor than we see him in Rogue One.
Yeah,
where in Rogue One he is desperate for attention and the allocades for the Death Star. At this point, he is stressed that the Death Star is not going to come together in time, and he wants to make sure that can happen. But he's using all his power, which is high, to make sure that goes off without a hitch. And whether or not it's working is a different question. But he is definitely, I mean, his interrogation scene with Dedra, that was a new side of Krennic to me.
That was crazy. I was so glad he was here.
What do you mean?
I'm just glad we got another scene of him with with Dedra.
Me too. That wasn't my reaction. My reaction was, whoa, he's like manhandling her in a lot of ways. And I was uncomfortable by it. Yeah. And I felt like it's funny because I think that we've lived with the character of Orson Krennic for years at this point, 8 years, right? And we see him die. We see him get sort of embarrassed in Rogue One and everything. But here, he was with Dedra being arrested in a cell, I don't know. It's hard not for me to not talk about what we had been talking about so much in season 1 with Dedra's character about she's surrounded by men.
Mm-hmm.
She's put in these situations where, I mean, Dedra's a war criminal. I'm there. She's evil. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to be very clear about that. But what makes her character so interesting is she's put in these situations that are workplace toxicity, where she's in a room, especially in that one scene where she's being interrogated by Krennic. There are conversations from men who are happening outside of the room, and she's not a part of them at all, even though she is directly responsible for them. And later, that same man comes back asking her for answers, but she's still in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless, it's just, I think the dynamics are so clear. The sexism within the ISB, it's very clear. And Krennic in that interrogation scene was part of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the great thing about Andor is there's always so many levels of what's going on in any one scene. And yeah, there's definitely the workplace misogyny that's happening with Dedra. That's been a part of her story from the very beginning. And I think here with Krennic, this connects, I think, to hearing Nemec's manifesto and Partagaz saying, like, that other guy saying, like, it's hard to contain. It's everywhere now. That's what Luthen tells Dedra is it's flown away. It's everywhere now. And for Krennic to hear that the Death Star has been leaked is like, this really is the beginning of the end for him. Because this is such a huge leak. It's not done on time. People are starting to hear about it. He's got Dedra Meero, who's had this intel for years. And then not only has she had it for years, but someone stole her information who's now dead. And who knows where that information is now. Krennic is stressed. He's having this is what, 24, 48 hours before he dies.
Actually, good question. I feel like I don't know the amount of the passage of time throughout Rogue One.
I don't think it's very long. I would say it's
maybe a week.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say even shorter, but it's not long at all. So this is all the compression of time, which I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I think is heightened so much now through the events of Andor, is for all of our characters, for Krennic as well, that this, like, it's crazy to think that he finds out that really, like, Dedra's had this intel for a couple of years now, but nothing has happened with it. Lonnie hasn't even looked at this information until the night before when he says he was logged in for 3 hours or something. He logs in, and from him logging in to Dedra's computer or whatever to 72 hours later, the Death Star is gone, or the plans are out about the Death Star, and Krennic is dead. Like, it's wild. It's crazy. Honestly.
By his own weapon.
Yeah, by his own weapon.
Poetic.
And ultimately by the person that he selected specifically to bring into the Gorman project. Krennic handpicked Dedra to be part of that operation. When if he had just left her on the Luthen beat, I mean, who knows what that would have ended up like. Again, the leak would have happened somewhere else, which I'm sure it is happening somewhere else too. But like,
well, it definitely would have, because Saw's people were getting wind of it too, as Cassian finds out on the Ring of Kafrene.
Yeah. So it's just,
they just have to put the pieces together.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you is that Krennic says, what single thing would drag me to this forsaken basement? Say it. Say the word. And she says, Death Star. He says, who else knows? And she says, Partagaz. So did Dedra tell Partagaz, or Partagaz?
I think Partagaz has always known.
He's got that clearance level. Okay. That's what I thought too, but I was a little confused.
I mean, I guess if we could go forward a little bit, Partagaz kills himself. What was he about to go to?
So I think he was going there. So this was kind of my question. If he wasn't supposed, because the other guy that comes in says they're waiting for you. So my guess is he was going to be arrested. And I think he was going to be arrested for the failure to get Kleya, basically. Because when here Partagaz and Krennic all have a meeting about Kleya later, Krennic tells Hurt to find Kleya at any cost necessary. And then he says, quote, failure will earn you a place in the ever-lengthening ISB death march.
That line was crazy.
That was an insane
It really went
line.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the way that only Krennic can do.
Mhm.
So I think that he was, because Hirt is gone, so he's not going to be arrested. Dedra's already, in the prison camp. And I think that's what was going to happen to Partagaz too. On the first watch, I was like, is this because he knows about the Death Star? But I don't think so.
I don't either. And that's what I wanted to link to. I agree
Yeah.
with you that that is the reasoning or what he was about to, take the fall for.
Mhm.
But another interesting character within these ranks of ISB officers that we just love to hate, but also we have ended up kind of liking the character of Partagaz, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
He is, I don't know, he's has such an interesting face and is sympathetic in his own ways.
Yeah.
And when he's listening to Nemik's manifesto, you sort of get this understanding that it really is resonating around, at least that's how I read it.
Yeah.
I read it as, oh, this is hitting. He's realizing that that he's part of what people are fighting against. I think he's thought that, but I think with listening to the manifesto, we are so deep in this that the only way out for me is
Yeah.
with a blaster.
Mhm.
So I feel like, and I was really like wowed with how that scene went down with the guy waiting outside and then
And
telling
knowing
that
almost.
knowing what was going to happen. And when the stormtroopers sort of like are alerted to the blaster bowl and he's just like with his hand just stand down and sort of relax.
Yeah.
So powerful. So powerful.
Yeah, I agree. It was an incredible scene, and there was a moment when we first heard the manifesto and realized that Partagaz was listening to it, that the expression on his face, it was almost like, is this reaching him? Is this changing him? Did it already change him a while ago and we just didn't know it, There was like a fleeting thought of that, but no, I think that Partagaz has, committed himself to the Empire and realized there was no way out. And to what you said earlier, if there are no winners unless you're
There's no winners.
the Emperor. And that's what's going to happen to all of these people. And there is no happy ending for them. One of the last things, one of the great lines from Krennic here with Krennic and Dedra is when he says, if you're not a rebel spy, you missed your calling.
Yes. I loved that.
What an insult. That. Just.
Yeah. And she says, I think twice, I'm not a rebel spy.
Yeah. Yeah. Just pitch perfect. And it's crazy. And we already talked about how Dedra watches Krennic leave. And after he also kind of chokes her just like Cyril did. And chat through the window in conversations that she's no longer a part of. Yeah. Now we go back to Kleya, though, and Kleya is back at the safe house, which it's clear no one has been there for a long time, and just an indicator of the passage of time and like how the rebellion has changed, and that someone like Cassian made the choice to go with the rebellion rather than continue living in the safe house, for example, working directly for Luthen. So I thought that was a good choice to have the safe house, the safe floor, I guess, run down and obviously not lived in. But Kleya digs out one last radio from the walls of the safe house. And again, the editing here was so great. And I think I've said this before, but I think sometimes the editing on Andor is challenging, particularly like in a discussion format, because we just go back and forth so much between storylines.
Well, particularly in this season.
Yeah.
Where we're dealing with one time period altogether. Yeah.
But the editing here of the back and forth between Kleya and Hirt watching the security footage, that was stupendous. I was like, again, just on the edge of my seat the whole time. This whole, like the Empire arriving to the safe house, Cassian arriving to the safe house. There were so many ways I saw this setup going of, maybe like the timing isn't even right here. Like the Empire is going to get there and they've already been gone for like a while, But I just thought that this this editing right here of her sending the message out and them having her picture up on the screen. And then also a few scenes later, having her picture in the middle with her glamour headshot, basically. Very similar to the very beginning of Andor when Cassian's headshot was in that conference room and they were all talking about Cassian. And it's just like, wow, they've got Kleya. They know who she is. It was so stressful.
I know, it really was. And it was sort of like, when they're pouring through all the security footage, it's like, Kleya, why didn't you do a better job of covering your face in some way? And then you're like, no, she would never do that. Also, it really heightens the sacrifice that she's also making at that point. I think that we talked a lot about Luthen's sacrifice, but I think she's also very aware that this is probably the end for her. Cassian disagrees, but that takes a while for Cassian to talk her off that cliff, really.
Yeah. Just insane. But she sends the message out, and who does it go to? Will.
Cassian Andor frat house.
Well, it goes to Will and his.
It does. It goes to Will, but I got so excited I had to talk about Cassian Andor frat house.
I was like, that's actually not true. It went to Will.
It went to Will, but eventually it ends up in the frat house. Okay. So I'm using frat house because Tony Gilroy has used frat house, by the way. Yeah, and it's so true. It's so true. It's just become like a boy hideaway when they're playing cards.
Yeah, and
drinking and laughing with K2.
Will comes around every once in a while, because he's living with Drina, which I'm glad he's had a consistent relationship. I do feel bad about the girl on Mina Rao, but it is what it is. That was 5 years ago at this point, so it's okay. But I'm glad that he's still with Drina and that she's also here on Yavin still. We saw them come in last arc, but I'm glad that she's still here on Yavin. And what was crazy to me is that Will never has a scene with Luthen, which
this is what I was really eager to talk about this, actually.
Okay.
Because in the second arc, Will has this great learning experience from Saw, and we have a great scene in which he's like melting his face, and we kind of get this thought that maybe Will is going to join Saw. And Saw's like, you're not with Luthen, you're with me, you're here, you're alive.
You're ready to fight.
You're ready to fight. And Will takes off his mask and breathes it in, and I think you get the point. He's like sort of baptized into this world without Luthen, okay?
Yeah.
And so for me, I saw that as him untethering himself from Luthen. And I feel like we just haven't had a lot of his character in order to understand how much that meant. I don't know. And so we talked about that a little bit last episode around being surprised that he was actually not with Saw and he was not a partisan with Saw. And in fact, he is back on Yavin and running missions.
He's kept this ability to contact with Luthen, which is a huge security risk for him to still have this radio. And the fact that he's kept it seems like Cassian doesn't even know that he has it. This ability.
I guess it's just a little different than the Will that we saw, I guess, 2 years ago at this point, taking off his mask and drinking in what it's like to be without Luthen. So I think there's a little bit of a character disparity there that I guess is like you can view in one way as just a character complication. And Will's not a main character. He's a secondary character. We don't actually have like a huge arc with him. So that's okay. And I think it's totally fine for him to have the radio and have this, relationship and knowing Luthen. But like you said, we don't actually really have a scene with Luthen and Will.
Yeah.
So it's just a little...
I think it's fair to be critical of this. Because
this is like the only thing I'm really critical about. I think that's just sort of a little confusing.
I think it's confusing. It's such a huge component to the second arc. It's a big storyline in the second arc. I mean, you don't just bring Forrest Whitaker around for like a few things, which I guess they have, to be fair, and like a bunch of other different venues.
Star Wars has, so.
But I don't know, having him like back here on set, like I thought that was a really big, impactful storyline. And we didn't even know that Will was working for Luthen until we see him there with Saw. And so clearly, and then, some of the things he said to Cassian in the next arc, where it's clear that he is still very involved with Luthen. Luthen gets things done. They're always just like preparing here on Yavin. but there's no, again, like we never had a scene between the two of them. And I guess we can imply that relationship, but the relationship that we're actually visually told about on screen is between Will and Saw. And so to not have any follow-up on that, I do think is a bit of a miss. And I think there could have been opportunity here, even for Will to come into the council room or whatever when they're talking to Saw, or they bring up Saw Gerrera or something like that. They, like, I don't know. I think there could have been a way to at least reference that relationship that the two of them had, or that time that the two of them had. Like, I think Saw would have had such an interesting line to say if he had seen Will in the Yavin base, which, Will is like talking to Draven a lot, Draven, and I don't know, he's got connections. He's like well known on Yavin. So
I guess that's Will's character, though, is that he has all these different connections.
I guess.
And just keeps it alive.
Yeah. I
think the point that we're hammering home is that after Will was with Saw and then is not with Saw anymore, that felt abrupt. And I still am feeling those ripples of that departure from what I thought was going to be something else.
Right.
And was sort of led as an audience to be something else. And so I guess him having the radio makes sense. It's just, I feel like there could have been a better ways to deepen that connection a little bit more. So then when Cassian later says that Luthen is dead, we feel that a little bit more for Will, because I think we know intellectually that that's rough for Will, but I didn't really feel that as much as I wanted to.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So maybe one day we'll get more of that story, but he has the radio. He goes, and then we get welcomed into Cassian's frat boy house. And we get to see them all playing dominoes with bets and drinking a new Star Wars game. Have we seen this game before?
I don't know. I couldn't tell if it was sabacc or not. I don't think it is.
It's sabacc. It definitely looks like dominoes.
Yeah.
When we get a little glimpse of the
it's like tiles.
Tokens. Yeah, the tiles they're playing with.
Space Mahjong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we have Cassian with his Rogue One haircut, which was just like, whew, okay.
We're here.
It's happening. It's happening. But he brings the radio to them, interrupts the game. I was really glad we had kind of this prolonged scene, especially with Cassian and K2, to really see K2's personality shine, obviously, and just see them having fun together, because we know the fun is the party's going to be over pretty soon here.
The party's very much nearly over.
Yeah. So it was nice to see them having this like poker night basically at their house with K2. I thought for sure we might see Chopper in the background of some of these Yavin shots, and
I was doing a lot of pausing.
Yeah, I didn't see him. So if he's there, please let us know. And we missed him, but I was hopeful that we might see him somewhere in the back.
He's in Rogue One, so that's it.
He is in Rogue One, but it would have been nice to see him here too. Okay, so Cassian and Will, and Melshi and K2, they're all looking at the radio. They're talking about how dangerous it is to have this radio. Really, K2 is like, this is breaking a lot of rules, as he says throughout the next 2 episodes about all the rules that they're breaking. And once they start getting transmissions again, Cassian tells K2 to basically fire up their ship. They're going to leave on a quote unquote test flight and go to Coruscant to actually respond to the transmission from the radio. So I think that's important that they didn't actually, obviously the radio transmits to Yavin, but they don't respond back from Yavin. They leave the planet and go to Coruscant before they make any kind of response to Kleya. And then Will is left alone on Yavin and he goes to Draven. And this was a great line. I thought Draven is also like a guy I love to hate. Like, I know he's with Rebellion, obviously a hero, makes lots of sacrifices, but hard personality, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's okay.
Yeah.
He just doesn't allow a lot of things. But it's funny how in one scene, and this is like built into the show, in one scene he's like mad at Cassian for going out, and then he's like, hey, can you help me with this thing that he's calling 3 times?
He's only talking
in this
to
next
you.
scene. Yeah. And I think that plays into what you're saying about, he's with the rebellion. He's a good guy. Okay. Just a reminder.
Yeah.
He's not a bad guy. He's not a bad guy.
But he says to Will, he says, Luthen Rail whistles and you two come running. And Will says it was an emergency, a final call. And he says, after all this, everything we put together here, knowing how vulnerable we are. And it really is such a big deal for Will to still have this radio. And for them, again, they didn't respond to it on Yavin. But the fact that they even have it is a security risk. It's a security breach. And it really is such a big deal. Like knowing how fragile everything is, knowing like what Mon and Saw are arguing about later on about, they're trying to warn Saw, they're all in this together. And Saw is like, yeah, F you. It is, we are when it's convenient for you, but no other time. There really is so much at stake. And similar to how the Empire is basically undone by this one leak that causes the Death Star to be blown up, everything is just as fragile for the rebellion. So
yeah, when the Death Star is closing in on blowing up Yavin 4, that scene now in A New Hope makes the tension is so much higher to me now knowing what went into keeping that secret.
Yeah, so true. I hadn't really thought about that scene as well, but yeah.
There's so many things.
There really are. There's so many connections, and it's great. We're so lucky.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. So they do arrive on Coruscant, and we get some more great kind of dialogue from K2 where he says, Melchi's never been to Coruscant. I've been to Coruscant. I was in a parade there once. 200 KX units. And then he gets this really kind of somber, ominous voice, and he says, the Emperor was there, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I don't know. And Cassian, of course, is kind of like half paying attention, and he's like, yeah, I wish I could have seen it, But they arrive on Coruscant, but at the same time, there are people in Hurt is back at the gallery, and they're trying to see what, if anything, they can still get to work from the back of the gallery with all the radio. And it turns out the transmitter is still active, so they can still tell when it's being used, basically when the signal is being used or something like that. They're basically able to find out where the safe house is or the general location of the safe house. One scene I wanted to talk about is when they know they're going to the safe house and the ISB, they've got their whole group of stormtroopers there to go arrest Kleya. And it's like the biggest guy they could find with the big mustache. He's like in charge of the group. And it really reminded me of the first of season 1 with Cyril when they go to Ferrix and there's that big guy leading not stormtroopers, whoever that group was. And he was like, aren't you gonna, like, don't worry, we do this all the time, we're awesome, we're so strong, you could give a motivating speech. And Cyril doesn't know how to,
terrible motivating speech.
Yeah. And the guy is like, okay, all right, let's move on. But it was really kind of similar to me, this setup.
The muscle.
Yeah, with Hurt, who is, not that muscular in comparison to this, lead stormtrooper they've got here. But I thought that was an interesting kind of parallel to season 1.
Well, it's just when the show Andor can make something extremely obvious, they will. Like, even down to they're bringing these people who look like are comically evil in a lot of ways, right? Like, this guy's the biggest, burliest guy. He's going to take it all down. And yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what they're going to do. And I think that's the same thing when we're talking about that scene in season 1. After Cyril's failed speech, they don't look tough. They look stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because they have a really terrible leader. And I think that's not necessarily the case in this situation. You really do feel that this is we're experiencing a heist episode, right? An episode and a half of a heist story, and you do sort of feel the tension of this guy's a big, burly, muscular guy. He can get through the door and inflict some pain somehow. Mm-hmm. I do have hope in that. So. Not obviously, I feel that as an audience member that he's a threat. Yes, he's a threat. So, yeah, that's that.
Yeah,
I feel like this whole scene, the tension was so good. Anna it was really, good payoff, I guess, for this location that was established, I think, in that second arc. And I felt like we spent a lot of time in the safe houses, and we kept coming back to it. We came back to it with Mon Mothma, and it kept changing the way it looked.
Yeah.
But it ultimately was this really drab, unseeming, unsettling place, right? And I think it has changed throughout the years and really proved to be an interesting set piece in the way that it shows the changes, but was always a risk right in the middle of Coruscant. So the fact that it comes back to the Empire finding that safe house, I think we were always probably leading here.
Yeah, I really liked the comparison, when the ISB get there and they go to the wrong apartment first. And we
Yes.
get kind of a glimpse at, a home in this building. It's very brief, but it definitely looks obviously way different than the safe house. And it even looks way different than when Cassian and Bix were living there in Arc 2. And a big part of their story in Arc 2 was, making this place a home and going to the grocery store and, Bix cleaning it up before Cassian came home and all of that, making it more livable, more cozy, I guess, if you want to put that word to it. But I really liked having the comparison to the apartment below, like, oh, in another life, maybe they could have had something like this, because it's an older couple too, like growing old together in an apartment like that, in a world that isn't run by the Empire or something. But I'm with you. I think having a set piece of the apartment change over the years, like when Vix and Cassian were living there, and then obviously it kind of had that deserted vibe a little bit when we saw it last week when they bring Mon Mothma back there, but very clearly, like, no one has been there for a long time by the time we get to this fourth and final arc. And that makes sense because it's clear that from the way that everyone kind of talks about Luthen and even some of the things that Kleya says to Cassian when they all get there, that, it feels like it's kind of just Luthen and Kleya in their network at this point. Like, obviously, they still have contacts like Lonnie. Will is still out there, but it seems like a lot of people have left Luthen directly, that were working for Luthen directly in the way that Cassian and Vel were. So it makes sense that no one would be using the safe house anymore. But I loved when they opened the door, or when Kleya finally opens the door and she sees that it's Cassian, and she says, "It would be you, wouldn't it?" And again, it's just like so ominous to kind of everything that has happened thus far. She tells Cassian about the weapon and the energy project. She makes him repeat it back to her, especially like Galen Urso. And she says, "This is direct from ISB as of yesterday morning. Luthen died for this." And again, Cassian says, "We cannot stay here, Kleya." And he tells her that they'll go back to Yavin. And she goes, "Yeah, I know about Yavin. I know all about it. I know what they think of Luthen there. That's to be my sanctuary." And Cassian says, "They need to hear this." And she says, "Well, then you tell them what I just told you." And again, Cassian says, "I'm not leaving you here." And we talked a lot about Cassian as being the messenger last week. And this is just another example of someone telling Cassian important information, a story that he needs to make sure is preserved and is carried along to the next person. And even though Kleya does get to Yavin, it's Cassian who is responsible, delivering the message, because she's in the infirmary. And I love having another example of someone entrusting Cassian with this really important message and this really important story and information that has to be told.
It happens every single arc. And I think this is the one that matters the most.
Yeah.
And I think that Kleya probably could have delivered the information, but it was Cassian. And it's Cassian that even Mon wants Vel to talk to as well. But in the end, Vel talks to Kleya. So I mean, she talks to Cassian too, but I think that in both ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I totally agree with you that this was really interesting. And I think the conversation, it even goes further when they're going back and forth about whether or not Kleya will come to Yavin. And I think as an audience member, you're so frustrated because you're like,
just go.
Just go.
There's no time.
Just go. Who cares what they think about Luthen? You need like a refuge. It's okay. Like, you do not need to be the sacrificial lamb here. Luthen was the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
I think Kleya saying, "You told me you were done once," and Cassian goes, "Yeah, and you told me I was wrong." Loved that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then the conversation continues with, "I made my choice. I made the right choice. No one can do this alone. He just couldn't swallow his pride." And then Kleya says, "And thank the galaxy he didn't. He stayed for this. He died for this. He stayed to figure this out. And you need to tell the people of Yavin what they're up against. You owe him that." And there's this real like push of, you owe Luthen. You owe Luthen. Everyone owes Luthen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Cassian does believe that. I think he does owe Luthen that. And I think as an audience member, I feel that too. That Cassian and the people who are on Yavin do owe Luthen a lot in everything.
Yeah. There's one part of what Kleya says here that I think is really telling too about her emotional state when, when she tells Cassian, "You told me you were done once," and he says, "Yeah, and you told me I was wrong." And then she says, "You left us anyway. You left us alone." And again, I think that implies that so many people have also made that choice to leave Luthen and Kleya and to join something like the formal rebellion. And even what some of the Rebel Alliance leaders talk about in the next episode about like his paranoia from Bail specifically, and like his inability to collaborate. Like, Luthen too is a hard personality and he demands everything. And this is what we see him tell Lonnie in, the wonderful monologue from season 1, and what he is really demanding of Cassian in arc 2. And this reminds me of, what Tony Gilroy said about this season in that like one random interview of, it's about what you sacrifice and about what you're not willing to sacrifice either. And I think there's kind of constantly that push and pull for our characters, because while Cassian chose to leave Luthen, he didn't choose to leave the cause. And he even almost left the cause when it, last week, as we saw it with Bix, but Bix made the choice to leave herself in order for Cassian to stay. And I think that, I don't know, I think that I feel like that concept of what you will sacrifice and what you won't sacrifice will be something to kind of revisit with Andor in the years to come, because I think we'll kind of see those threads even more so throughout these stories as we sit with them more and kind of think about them more.
I totally agree. And I think at this moment, though, Kleya is ready to sacrifice herself. And in the next episode, we end on this insane cliffhanger of the ISB people coming on in, inching closer and closer to the apartment. And man, the tension just like couldn't be higher. And in the beginning of the next episode, episode 12, the actual finale, oh my God, we're finally here, Cassian says, "You need to see the place that you helped build." And I just really liked this line because I think it was this real, I don't know, a reality check, I guess, for the fact that Kleya actually doesn't need to make a sacrifice now, that they're not leaving without her, Can
you imagine being Melshi in this moment? Like, he's just kind of standing in the kitchen throughout all of these.
Melshi's just like always just kind of there.
Yeah. And Cassian and Claire are having these like big conversations, and Melshi's like, "Oh, man, we have got to go."
Yeah. "Cass, let's get out of here."
He's like, "We can talk about this on the ship."
Yeah. I feel like I relate to Melshi in that way, because it's really just like, let's just friggin' go. Time's a ticking.
Yeah.
And honestly, time being ticking actually is throughout the entire episode 12. There's in a lot of motifs. The drip, drip, drip of the water, we're quite literally working against the clock in all different ways.
Yeah.
K2 ends up saving them all, which, let's talk about how the last episode of Andor starts with a hallway scene, and then Rogue One ends with a hallway scene, like a hallway horror scene. Same thing here.
Yeah, in this like decrepit apartment floor.
And damn, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say. I think the way that this was staged, I was like, thank God for K2.
Yeah, they really had no way out.
The way that he's like, "Cassian, I cleared a path." And he's just so casual with it. Like, oh my God. All right.
Yeah. And then later when he's like, "I assume any doubts about my value have been erased."
Well, I actually kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that, because Cassian doesn't respond to anything affectionate towards K2, if you've noticed.
Yeah, he doesn't.
These episodes. And I think that we're supposed to then think about his relationship with K2 throughout Rogue One growing a little bit, right? That by the end, when K2 sacrifices himself for Cassian and Jyn, like I believe that he would do that now, of course, but I think that Cassian feels a sense of attachment to K2. He's already feeling a sense of attachment to him, I think, in these episodes, but we don't actually see that. We don't see him say that, but we will in Rogue One, essentially. Like, we see it way more.
Yeah. It made me wonder how, like, if there had been conversations about if they should be taking K2 on missions, and if there was perhaps pushback from, like Mon Mothma or Bail or Draven. Because I think that Cassian would still want to bring him. Just maybe he hasn't been like field tested that much to make sure his settings don't revert or something like that. So this seemed to me like K2 was like, clearly I'm an asset to the team. So if you could pass that along.
Yeah, there was definitely a sense of I usually just stay on the ship type of situation.
Yeah,
so
that's true. And he was on the ship until he noticed that the comms were down.
Exactly. And God, okay, that was just so good. And then I was so stressed that they didn't close the door.
Yeah.
I was like, why aren't you guys closing the door? Even Melchi's like, we can still close the door.
Cassian said no, then they don't have another way out.
Yeah.
There's
you
only
have to always
one
build
way
your
out.
exit.
Yeah.
They didn't really build their exit.
No, they didn't, because they were just chit-chatting.
They were chit-chatting up a storm, and it was not okay. Time's a ticking.
It was not okay. But I really, it was so scary seeing K2 come down the hallway, especially once he had Hirt on the front of him like a shield.
Oh
and
the lighting
it
of
was
that,
so
that
scary.
was crazy.
Well, it came out in some interview last week that there was actually kind of like a bonus episode or something like that was originally planned, kind of like a horror story with K2 when he was, I think, like being brought back from Gorman or on Gorman, like something like that, and they had to cut it, but it was meant to kind of be like in a horror story kind of format. So it's fitting that they would kind of put elements of that here, because it was really scary and very haunted house kind of vibe in this apartment building and things like that. But the scene where all three of them get stunned, but like a big stun, it seems like very intense. And Cassian is like still trying to protect Kleya while figuring out which direction to shoot, basically, because he still can't see yet. I don't know. I thought this whole escape was really great. And again, the tension was just mounting every possible moment. And then they just kind of casually walk out, because that's what you have to do. You can't run or else you look suspicious. I will say I thought it was kind of funny that I texted Charlotte that when Kleya, is kind of down and out for the count, I was like, how are they going to get her out of here? I was like, there's no way Cassian's going to carry her, because I'm a Diego Luna stan first and foremost, but he's also not a muscular guy. And I was like, I just can't see him carrying Kleya out. And then we cut to the next scene. I was like, of course it's Melchi. Of course he's carrying her out.
I thought it was going to be K2.
I think that might have even been better too.
Yeah, but I think K2 has to be their guns.
Yeah, he's got to be the lookout.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But I was like, there's no way Cassian's going to carry her, and he doesn't.
And then they have so much issue. Well, first off, they have no issue getting off Coruscant, which I thought, wow, the ISB people are so stupid that they didn't even think about the parked U-wing right there. They didn't even track it. They're,
Yeah, no, they didn't even see it. And this is what I think is also part of why Partagas ends up kind of having to be brought in, because they created this whole story about Kleya having this disease outbreak that she could cause, and to devote every single thing to that. And then they have this like special crew, the special ops crew that's going to go in and actually arrest her. And then when they try to get more help, get other comms on the line, every other resource is taken up by this fake story that they created.
Fail.
Huge fail.
Yeah, huge fail. Yeah, and they don't even track they turn off the comms in the area, but they don't even track who is actually in the area. They're not really creating a perimeter at all, which is so stupid.
They're slipping.
Yeah, they're slipping. So when they try to get back to Yavin, this is what I was sort of saying before, that they were given so much trouble around coming in with Kleya and the fact that they left. And I think that, again, the security protocol around Yavin seems so insane and absurd, but it's really not. It's not at all. And I think that this is the fact that they were flanked by those two X-Wing, they're really on it and they want to make sure.
Yeah, you got to make sure you know who's coming onto the planet.
Exactly. And for all they know, it could have been someone in Cassian's U-Wing from the Empire ready to spy on them and then going to bring that or like shoot that intel someplace else. Who knows?
Yeah.
So it's totally fair. But I think that did go back to in Rogue One when Cassian's like, make sure they know we're coming in on a stolen ship.
Yeah. In a big way.
And so then we finally see Mon. She has a new haircut.
Yep.
I'm devastated. I miss her fashion. Now we're getting drab, you know? I feel like we were always going to end up here, but I miss Fashion Queen Mon already.
I know. It's a far cry from her beautiful wedding attire.
I know. It's just like, okay, we've made it. Okay. It was just like a stark realization. But we see Mon having a lot of issues with Saw. We saw Mon have a lot of issues with Saw in Rebels. Mm-hmm. Great episodes in Rebels around that. And this conversation really reminded me of those episodes in Rebels where we see this big hologram of Saw's face outside of Yavin. So good. And it's like him and Mon sparring.
It's great.
Yeah, it was that's such a great episode. But we get a glimpse of that here with Saw being like, why should I believe anything you say? And Mon's like, it's the Empire after you, Saw, not us. And Saw's like, you spies, I don't believe anything you say. And after Saw hangs up on them and Bail is basically like, he's insane. And this is what I was saying before when they're like, well, he's actually not insane. We do have spies with him. And yeah, there's a ton of spies. That's how we know that he's on Jedha.
Yeah.
Even though he won't tell us that.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a great detail.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I thought it's a great kind of parallel to Rebels as well, because they do have such a fantastic argument, Mon and Saw in Rebels too. And Saw basically tells Mon, that they're both criminal. And in Rebels, she tells him that they're both tells her that they're both criminals to the Empire. And when all is lost and the Empire wins, he says something like, you can sleep well at night knowing you followed the rules, or something like that. That's what he tells her in Rebels, which I think is just it's such a great conversation. And this is such a perfect kind of tie-in to that they're still having these conversations, and to see how frustrated Mon Mothma is with Saw, and we're only trying to warn you, and Saw is just, this is Rogue One Saw, so he's really at the end, and we know kind of how crazy, how much he's kind of lost it in Rogue One. So this is who we're seeing now. So it makes sense.
Yeah, but I agree. I just want to push back a little bit against that, because I think that about his mental capacity, I guess, where I think that Andor is making a case for, no, he's kind of valid in his paranoia.
Yeah, I think he always has been, but there's also,
I don't know if I viewed him as that in Rogue One. I don't know if I viewed him as valid in his paranoia.
I think,
and his spies.
I think Saw
are around him.
I think Saw has always had elements where you understand his methods and his madness. And I think that's part of the intrigue of his character.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this just added another layer to me, or like a shadow, I guess, on Saw, around like, oh yeah, he really does have spies all around him. It's true.
Yeah.
That I think it makes me view his character in Rogue One a little bit differently.
Yeah, like how suspicious he is of.
Yeah. Because we never got confirmation that was actually true.
Yeah.
I just want to like take a second and say I kind of expected Bor Gullet to be part of Saw's story in Andor in some way, and we didn't get that. And I think that's kind of funny, because it's still such a question mark in Rogue One
like
to
how
me.
We got that.
And I'm sure it's answered someplace else in canon, and I don't know that, but I did sort of think that they were going to bring that in somehow. But regardless, what they really needed to set up is that they're struggling with Saw, and that they have the intel that he's on Jedha.
Yeah, and it brings to light too how the Rebel Alliance, the leaders that we see here, they're all they're all so irritated at these factions that keep kind of causing trouble for them. And Luthen is a part of that too. They say that he's been a thorn in their side for a while now. So Saw is a part of that. Luthen is a part of that too. And I think I'd said this last week about how like Luthen is a version of Saw in the way that he operates independently from the rebellion in the same way that Saw does, and how that can be challenging and that can be problematic as well for the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah, I like thinking about Luthen and Saw as similar parties.
We did get to see Admiral Raddus here in this episode, which I was very excited about. I love.
Me too. I was more excited about it than I thought I would.
Me too. I love Raddus. I was like,
me too.
Look at him go. He's getting information. He's like telling people what to do.
I know. I was also excited to see that Senator Palmo was there too, the woman in the gold hood, even though she is very fiery around things I just disagree with her
right
often, but I was excited to see her and just fill in these gaps and these pieces for Rogue One. There's also that other guy there. I don't know his name.
Yeah, that guy, he's there.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know him.
And they talk about Dodonna's not there, but yeah, I just feel like I was really feeling the closeness to Rogue One.
Yeah, I was so glad that they were both there, Senator Palmo and that other guy and Raddus.
Yeah. And Bail is the one that is really fighting against the information and the intel with regards to Luthen. He says, the problem, Captain, is Luthen. It's hard not to wonder if your judgment here might be less than objective. And I love what Cassian says. He says, I have to disagree. Everything I know about it's everything I know about Luthen that makes me believe about the information. And I think it's so great that Cassian is the one that is so, pushing back against everyone, being like, did any of you know Luthen beyond Senator Mothma? He said, do you have any idea how much you owe him? When I say I know Luthen, I mean, I know the good and the bad. I know what was wrong with him. I had a front row seat on that, and I made my choice 2 years ago to join here. He says, I don't know what he was told is true or not, but it's insulting to hear him run down by people who've given a fraction of his sacrifice to this rebellion. That makes me think of what we were previously talking about around the concept of sacrifices and what people are willing to give up and what they're not. And I think you can even talk about that with regards to the Alliance members at the table when Cassian is delivering this information. I think we know how much Bail has given up. And now he's here on Yavin, which we didn't even comment on after he said, I'll see you next year to Mon. We know what Mon has given up. We don't know what these other people have given up to be there.
Yeah.
And I would assume that if they were really big stories, maybe we would have seen them in Andor, but we didn't. So I don't know whether or not that's true that Cassian says, but we do know that Luthen paid for his sacrifice with his life. So, and they're all still alive. So there is that.
Well, I think Luthen has also sacrificed like any kind of security, like operating on his own is a huge sacrifice, and it's what he thought was the best path forward for getting intel.
Ultimately, I think it was.
Yeah, it was. I was like, at first I was so sad that Bail and Cassian weren't like BFFs, because I love Bail.
The Latinos in space. I know.
Yeah, I love Bail Organa so much. And obviously I love Cassian so much as well. And it was kind of hard to see Bail leading this charge, basically, of, I don't know how much stock we should put in this information you've gotten, when you really only just have snippets. You don't have a full picture, basically. This part I thought was such a burn when they say, Cassian's like, talks about the sacrifice, and Bail's kind of like, all right, when's the last time you two spoke? He says, a year ago, when he had me rescue Senator Mothma from the Senate. And everyone kind of looks at Bail, and he's like, duly noted. And it's kind of a low blow, even though it's the truth, because everyone knows that Luthen had to do that because Bail was infiltrated by the Empire, and that he had bad people working for him, and
Luthen, the only reason why Mon got out was because of Luthen.
Yeah, and it's just it's rough. But then Bail responds, a lot can happen in a year, He stayed on Coruscant too long. The rumors we have are that the ISB was onto him. I'm afraid it's just as easy to believe that Luthen was the one being played. And Raddus says, or worse. And then Bail continues, his paranoia, his secrecy, his inability to collaborate, the web of doubts he created, it makes everything unbelievable. And it's like you can kind of see that as well, because we've been talking about on the show about how Luthen is kind of like this close to crashing out in some of these arcs, especially when everything was happening with Davo and the great argument he and Kleya have about how everything is falling apart. It's true. And there probably were fewer and fewer people that Luthen was willing to bring into the fold as time went on. Whereas someone like Cassian, who he worked with for so long, Cassian leaving to join the rebellion was like a deep cut. And you can't just replace someone like Cassian at that point in the cause. Or I feel like Luthen probably didn't want to, or never felt like anyone was good enough. Not for Cassian, not compared to Cassian, but just like in general to do what he needed them to do. Recruiting people probably got a lot harder, especially when you have an actual rebel alliance that, I don't know, maybe has some sort of benefits package or something like that. But
well, they're taken care of pretty well on Yavin.
Yeah, I mean, again, would like to Airbnb some of those places.
Yeah.
Maybe not Will and Drina's, but definitely I would do Vel's, but I definitely would Airbnb Cassian's.
There's no doubt. Cassian lives a luxurious
He's got
life.
like a multi-bed apartment.
Yes, it is so nice.
Yeah.
And plants.
Yeah, and he has no leaks. It kind of looked like Vel had leaks in hers later on, but whatever. Bail confines Cassian to his quarters, and Cassian asks if he has permission to visit the infirmary, and Mon immediately grants permission. And I think it was, I'm really glad there was kind of this tiff between Bail and Cassian, because it makes the payoff at the end of the episode where Bail comes to Cassian's frat house a lot better and a lot more meaningful too. And I think a great addition to Bail's character, that even though there are reasons why they shouldn't trust Luthen, I think it's again something about that gut instinct and that feeling of what they're fighting for, that this is something that they should follow, that they should trust, and that he, again, Cassian did such a huge thing by going out. Bail says at the beginning of that meeting, he says, apparently you've been chasing something you think is worth violating every rule we live by. And you really can't kind of downplay how bad it is that Cassian just left without anyone knowing, without any kind of permission, and then came back with someone else, like, and not to mention the radio and everything like that we've already talked about. But I think Bail has a lot of reasons to be suspicious of the intel, but the fact that he comes around and sees logic in what Mon and Draven eventually come back and kind of convince him about Cassian and the information from Luthen, I think is just a great addition to his character and what we know him to be. And sad because, again, in like 48 hours, he'll be gone too. 72.
Yeah, I love how when Bail and Cassian talk in Cassian's apartment, he says, if I die fighting the Empire, I want to go down swinging. Cassian laughs a little bit and he says, you find that amusing? And Cassian says, no, but you and Luthen would have gotten along way better than you think. And then he says, may the force be with you. And it was a really good interaction. But it did make me feel a little sad because the whole, if I would just want to go down swinging, I don't think Bail goes down swinging. I think he dies so fast with the Death Star. It's nice that I guess his inkling, his instinct, like you say, was fighting against that and believing that exists. But it's so tragic that that's how he dies.
Yeah, it is. That scene is just, all of it is sad. It's, two dead men walking and they don't know it yet.
Yes.
But we know it as the audience. It's just tragedy.
And Cassian does go down swinging.
He does. But he also doesn't know if anyone has heard their message.
True.
He wants to believe it. Jin believes it. And I think he believes in Jin's belief. So, yeah, I don't know. It is sad. Bail is the one who I think they had to convince Bail and be in agreement about letting Cassian off planet again.
Yeah. And even Mon goes on a little bit of an undercover quest to figure out the truth behind it. And this is a very long night. I was like, man, this episode is a one long
well, it's like daylight
night.
saving, so like the sun goes down at
Yeah.
6.
Okay, sure. But I was like, okay, it's pouring rain. It's so moody. It's so ominous. Kleya is
Crashing out.
crashing out, so spacey, walking out, taking out
I
all
was
the wires off
so
of her. I was so
worried.
nervous.
Yeah, at every call, I was like, can people stop leaving Kleya alone, please?
And then I was just so thrilled that it was Vel who finds her and brings her in and is so nice around her after they had that. They have such an interesting relationship. We were even like, ooh,
a little spark, a little sparky.
Yeah. At the wedding
Yeah.
a while ago. And they spar a little bit, but that's all off the table here. They're two old friends, I guess, or people. I don't know if you can call these people friends. It's so hard.
That's what Vel said.
I think that they are.
Says,
yeah, they are friends. You're among friends.
You're here with friends.
Yes, they are friends. I am loving I have friends everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I want to like make a t-shirt or a bracelet or something with that on it, because when she says I have friends everywhere and then she says you're here with friends, like you said before, that was so great. We've been hearing I have friends everywhere so much, and it like really hit, I guess, hearing that from Vel just reiterate that it's sort of like more than a code word, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just waiting for it to mean a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it was always a nice code word.
Yeah, and it just I think that the finale of Andor really gave us such great like moments with these characters to talk to each other, and we got to see a lot of different pairings together that really felt like closure. And the scene with Vel and Kleya, I think, really was part of that too, knowing that they had kind of a sparky relationship throughout, especially at the beginning of the season. And when Vel sees her in the rain and she goes, Kleya, it's Vel. And Kleya is in such a daze, and she says later she doesn't even know where she is. And I have friends everywhere. You're here with friends. And I think it will take Kleya some time to fully realize that, because she's lived so long as, I don't know the right word to describe Kleya as, I guess, like she's the one in charge of the radio. She's like, I don't want to say like puppeteer or like puppet master, because that has a negative connotation on it. She's the one who kept track of where everyone was the one who was communicating with everyone at the same time, making sure they were only communicating with each other when they needed them to, all of that. She's I guess she's the conductor with Luthen. She's orchestrating all of that. And now to kind of have all of that taken away from her and done, it's kind of like, what does she do now? And I think that in a world being able to kind of almost relax on Yavin, like even Cassian says you'll be able to rest there, and realize that she can have a connection with someone like Vel through everything that they've shared before and everything that they can do moving forward. Like, what will Kleya's role be in the rebellion? I don't know, but I think she will stay in the rebellion and on Yavin. I think it was such a great scene. And before that, Vel going to Cassian, I didn't know how much I needed this scene between Vel and Cassian because they haven't had one this season. We see Vel go to Bix and talk about, how leadership wants more from Cassian, yada, yada, yada. But this scene, when they toast to Luthen, I thought was so great. And then they decide to toast to everyone, and they start listing everyone who was on their team on Aldhani, Nemik, and Cassian says for Cinta, and Vel says to Cinta, and then they say for the Gormans, and then for the Aldhanis as well. I don't know. I just thought it was a really touching scene, and it makes me think how Vel will be the one to deliver the news to Bix, I think, about what happens to Cassian, because I definitely got the feeling that she knew where Bix was. And
absolutely. She says you should reconnect with her.
Yeah. And I think she knows about the baby too.
Yeah.
And Bix is like very clear. I don't know if Bix like doesn't want him to know. Obviously we don't really have any insight into that, but even Cassian,
I would assume that she doesn't want him to know.
Yeah, not
because
at this moment.
She doesn't want him to take the eye off the prize.
Yeah, I think so too. And anyway, I thought this scene between them, it's clear to see that Vel still has kind of conflicting feelings about Luthen. Like, obviously, I think she respected him, but everything that happened with Cinta, the fact that he did kind of keep them apart, I don't know if Vel like ever fully forgave him for that. That's kind of what I imply about their relationship. And she asks if it's real, and Cassian says he died for it. Does it matter what he did to us along the way? Does it matter how it twisted him? None of this exists without him. None of us are here. And I think that's such a good way. We've talked so much about like Luthen's morality, and a lot of our like heroes and the choices that they have to make are really difficult choices that aren't a perfect bow on how it doesn't save everyone, a lot of the choices that they make. And Luthen is definitely, that's a huge part of what he has to do. And we've seen that time and time again throughout Andor. And the ways that it hurt the people that were working closest with him, like Vel and like Cassian. And I think this is kind of the perfect way to kind of think about that morality in some ways and those choices. And it was hurtful, and we have a complicated view of him, but he died for this. And this is right now the most important information that we've gotten so far. And this, I think Cassian in this moment is feeling like how big of a deal this could be, and that has to supersede everything that has ever been challenging or difficult or good about or bad about the relationship with Luthen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better than you said it. I was so thrilled to have this conversation. I just feel like this one long night was just a ton of conversations. And a lot of them felt like, quote unquote, wrapping up, but a lot of them didn't. And I think that ominous sense did permeate every single conversation, honestly. The moment when Vel says you should reconnect with Bix, though, if we can linger here a little bit, it's like you said, like she's clearly the connection to Bix. But that's when I was like, there's more than we think that there could be with Bix.
Before this episode started, when episode 12 started, the thought of a baby went through my mind, and I was like,
I've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks.
Is there gonna be a baby? Is there gonna be a baby? And then as soon as Vel said this, I was like, there's a baby. There's absolutely
that's what I mean. There's a baby. And the thing is should we talk about that now?
Yeah.
So I love that the series ends with a baby. And I think I've been thinking a lot about Camille Paglia's thesis on Revenge of the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we've talked about that a lot. There's a viral video circulating right now. I did repost it recently, but she has she's a critic, an
art critic.
An art critic and theorist. She was so like enthralled by Revenge of the Sith, and she talked about how it is such an important piece of information and piece of art that describes the end of Truth and Republic, and how it ends with two men crying, and it's just like a really powerful expression. She says it so much better than I'm saying right now. Such a powerful expression of tragedy, and how it's an unbelievable, hopeful sense that it ends with two men stewarding babies, and how it ends on the most hopeful note with babies. The emphasis on baby. We end with baby. It's like this is the most tragic and perfect distillation of tragedy in Revenge of the Sith, but it still finds this hopeful note that like flows perfectly around the fact that we end with two babies.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Andor also ends with a baby, I think this show could have ended. And I think that there's also just to go back to Revenge of the Sith, there's obviously an extremely ominous element around the fact that these babies are born and both their parents are not, they have new parents and they're separated, and that's ominous in itself. And there's a whole empire now. I think Revenge of the Sith is a tragedy. I just want to be crystal clear about that. But there is a sense of hope around these two babies. And you feel that with Andor too, that there's a sense of ominous it's hanging over everything. Cassian's going to die, but this baby lives on.
I think it talks a lot about, actually, when we went over it was either the commentary or the deleted scenes from Revenge of the Sith, and they were talking about having like inserts of Yoda into the final kind of epilogue, if you will, of Revenge of the Sith, and how they made the choice to take that out because it was more hopeful with the babies and like you with the children, with Luke and Leia. And it ultimately is a story about hope. And that's what George was saying about why the end of Revenge of the Sith was like so important to kind of get right in the editing and like the delivery of the babies to Alderaan and to Tatooine. Because even though it's the darkest film, it ends on the most hopeful note, really, in a lot of ways, because we, the audience, know where these children are going and what their destinies kind of ultimately are. And there's so much hope in that. And I think it's the same thing with this ending of Andor and Rogue One, because like we know where it's going. We know it leads to the death of Cassian and to a lot of these people. But it's hopeful because one, we know just how great what Cassian does in Rogue One is when it comes to the Death Star plans. But then knowing that there's still this relationship with Bix and this child that they had together that is out there who can kind of carry that legacy on perhaps in some way in the future is hopeful in and of itself too. And that they are safe and that they are okay. And that's really what Cassian wants for them, for Bix.
And Bix's own sacrifice to remove herself in the place of knowing that Cassian was part of something greater means so much more. I don't think it means more, but it to me, actually, yeah, to me, it means more knowing that she had another piece of information, maybe around that she was like that this would distract him. He's so much more important than this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think obviously it's hard because I think that we're drawing a parallel to Luke and Leia and then to this baby. But I think it's similar, but I don't think it's exactly the same because I think that there is a bigger sense of sadness around the fact that Cassian is not going to be a part of this life. He will never know.
Yeah.
And we know that he will never know because now we know everything that we can about Cassian. So he's never going to know. And that's terrible and sad. But I do think the camera lingers so long on Bix and this baby. It could have been, this is a long scene. I feel like we stay a while with Bix and the baby looking out into this bright sun. I just felt like we were here for a while and we were really like drinking this in, this moment of Bix with this baby. This baby's like getting a little restless. She's calming the baby and she's looking out into the sun and it's not even like a sunset, right? It's this bright, bright light. And it reminded me of the bright, bright light, obviously, that Cassian sees at the end of his life. And I wanted to draw a little bit of a parallel that I don't even know is there. But I think in this moment, we could have seen Bix close her eyes and we didn't because she's just standing there like sort
around.
No. It's specifically I'm talking about closing the eyes because Cassian at the end of his life does not close his eyes. He's looking off someplace else. And I've always thought that detail was sort of weird. And I kind of chalked that up to like a mistake a little bit, but I don't think it is now. And I just am sort of like, okay, is Cassian, can we view Cassian as looking into what his life could have been or something? And Bix not closing her eyes here, I thought that was purposeful.
I mean, I'm sure it was. Yeah. Yeah. It is a very long closing shot. And I think you're supposed to sit in the emotion of knowing that they'll never be together again and that he will never even know that he has a child out here with Bix and that he doesn't even know where Bix is. You know, he doesn't know that she's on Mina Rao with B2 and with Brasso's, I can't think of her name right now. Lila?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Talia. That was her name.
Talia.
And Talia is there too, and that she is safe and they will never reconnect again. And I think you're right. I think that we are supposed to draw a comparison between the bright light at the end of Rogue One and the bright light here at the end of Andor. But I think Tony Gilroy wants us to sit in kind of that sadness that, you know, Cassian he's left, like the way it's edited, right? Cassian has left Yavin. He's going to meet Tivik on the Ring of Kafrene. That story has started. And Bix is on Mina Rao, like at the same time, you know, like those things are overlapping, I think. And I think I was pretty critical last week about like Bix's characterization and wishing that I knew or that she was doing something in the rebellion when we had kind of only seen her at home, like kind of waiting for Cassian, when we know that she's extremely capable. And I still think I feel that a little bit, to be honest, from her character. But I think seeing her here in a safe place, and I think kind of reflecting on it more, and the choice that she did make to leave Cassian, obviously I think was the biggest sacrifice she could make in removing herself from the pair of her and Cassian, and knowing that, thinking that perhaps she knew she was pregnant at the time, and even if she didn't, that like this was the place she was meant to be for this time period. And that is where Cassian needed to be. And there was actually at the beginning of this episode, in the recap, they recapped the line that Mon said to Bale, where she said, "If you're brave enough to stay, I should be brave enough to go." And you know how that played into Mon and Bale's relationship with him staying in the Senate for another year and all of that. But it really applies to like Bix and Marva too, and how Bix knew that Cassian had to stay, and in a way, she had to be brave enough to leave. And Marva even said something similar to Cassian in season 1 about why she's going to stay on Ferrix and fight the fight on Ferrix. But Cassian, he can't stay. He has to leave, and she has to stay. And how, I don't know. It gave me a better appreciation for her storyline. And like I said, I do still wish that we had seen more of what she was actually doing in the rebellion. But I feel like I understand her choices better this week. And like, I don't know, I just have a greater appreciation for that storyline and the whole idea of like being brave enough to leave and also being brave enough to stay, and the ways that we've seen that kind of theme play out through all of our characters. And again, just how tragic it is that none of our pairs got to be together, that they all had to be separated. And that's the sacrifice of war and what they have to do in order to accomplish defeating the Empire.
And I think this season really did crystallize that. We had that second arc that really focused deep on attachments and love. And in the very Jedi way, we talked about that. But what it means really to give everything to the rebellion when you actually cannot give everything to the rebellion if you are in a relationship or, yeah, I don't know. I also, right after the scene is when we get the credits playing, and the credits are so poignant and have a death knell, like a funeral toll in there. And it's not as dark as a normal funeral toll, a death knell. I listened to a few on YouTube because I was like, I really want to place what this sound is. It's brighter than a normal funeral toll. And I think that's purposeful, obviously, because we're reflecting on the sacrifice versus the death, I guess. Yeah. Rough. You sit there with your tears like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Can't believe what we just went through. And I think if we need to back up a little bit in terms of talking about the different flashes that we get before this, and as Cassian is walking through the Yavin base about to get on his U-Wing to zoom off to the Ring of Kafrene, but we get a bunch of different scenes. Actually, let's start in the beginning. We see Cassian watering the plants.
This was the beginning of the end for me. I was like, no.
The fact that him watering his plants, like, I can't. First off, I did have a thought. I'm like, it would just rain so much.
They're indoors. They're indoors.
Yes. Yeah, they're indoors and he doesn't get any drips. But the fact that he's watering his plants, like, they did not have to do this, and they did.
They really...
It's just awful. It's actually awful.
It really is.
To tear our heart out that this man is tending to his plants, and those plants are never going to be tended to.
That's not true. Someone else. Okay. Well, because the thing is, someone else is going to move into that apartment.
Well, I don't think so. Yavin is kaput.
That's true. That's true.
After this, like they leave.
The plants will be. They're gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
Okay.
They leave after the medal ceremony. So
they do.
Anyway, yeah, tough. The freaking plants like really broke me. I can't even. People are going to be talking about those.
Yeah, that was the beginning of the end.
And the music is a ticking clock here, where it's just so much. We see the rebel crew, they're marching and running, and I was like, it's giving Death March, but it's purposeful because all those people. You even see that alien POW in there. I was like, oh my God. It's the Rogue One crew led by Melshi. It's just like they're all gonna die on Scarif.
Stop.
It's so much. It's so much. And then Mon and Vel at breakfast I thought was cute because I felt like a big missing piece was the parent of it all. And then we get Mon and Vel at breakfast sitting next to each other and like loving their conversation, I guess. And we see Perrin in the back of the car boozed up with one lady. That one lady. We saw that lady before. We've seen her before.
She's Stekken's mother, I'm pretty sure.
That's what oh god.
Yeah.
That's so messy.
It's so messy.
Yeah, he hates his life. You can tell when he's reaching for the bottle.
It just makes me so sad.
I'm so glad that we got this, but I just really wish that we got a little bit more about Mon and Perrin. It's okay. I'm fine with it. But I do think that we could have gotten more. But seeing Perrin obviously in a bad place here, it wasn't this season 2 did what it needed to do in the fact that I didn't feel like he got what he's coming for, like what's coming for him. Like I didn't feel any sort of satisfaction with Perrin being like essentially an alcoholic in the back seat, right? I didn't feel like that was good.
No. Well, the last time we saw him was at the party, and he's kind of he's like kind of trying to back Mon up in her argument with Krennic, and so it was like,
yeah, we were in an agreement
that we
thought
podcast.
Maybe, yeah, we thought they were in kind of in an okay place.
Yeah.
He has been supportive in the like the facade of it all for Mon Mothma, so I just felt like I don't feel if I only saw this at the end of without this season and was just thinking about season 1, I think this scene would have felt sort of satisfying, but or like yeah, he got what's coming to him, blah blah, right? No, I don't feel that at all. In fact, I feel like this is a tragedy.
Yeah, I do too.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think also we've been heavily influenced by Reign of the Empire book, Mask of Fear, which shows a different side and I think really kind of explains the complexities of Mon and Perrin's relationship a lot too. So if you haven't read that, definitely recommend. But yeah, I feel sad about where we left Perrin. And I do wish, we had said this last week, that there had been maybe a line or something about, you know, you won't get to see Perrin again, or I'll have someone tell Perrin such and such. Something like that, I think, would have gone a long way, at least for this storyline. But I'm glad that I'm not glad where he is, but I'm glad we saw him.
And it does feel a little out of place, right? Because it's the one thing that's off Yavin, really. I mean, we see Saw and Krennic, so it's not that, but it feels a little like we didn't need
we haven't
this,
seen him in a while, and
yes.
He doesn't factor into Rogue One, whereas Krennic and Saw both do.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So then we see Kleya waking up in Vel's house, and she walks outside and she sees the soldiers running, and it like brings a little bit of a smile to her face. I think that she's impressed almost, and that this recognition that this is a machine and she helped build this machine.
I hope so. Yeah, I think she will get there. And I think I saw the beginning of that in this moment. And I think she's it's waking up on a new day. And
I am so glad that we still have this character.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
I need to see more of her. She needs to come back somehow. She's
with the rebellion. There's so much she can do now.
I know. It's crazy. We need it. I can't wait for her to pop up in another story. We're going to go crazy.
We are.
And then we see Dedra in the prison block, and she starts to sob when the lights go out. And oh my God.
There she is.
It is, her character's so complicated.
Yeah. It's so complicated. And I think this is what would have happened to Partagaz. If he hadn't killed himself. And I'm sure that's what Dedra is thinking about right now.
Absolutely.
Honestly. And like you said, she has no one, and she has had no one, and she's alone, and this is where she's going to die.
God, it's so crazy. And the fact that I think that what hit me also is that while Cassian and everyone escaped from Narkina 5 in that prison still existed. That prison still exists. That system of that cell with the electrocuting floors and the lights going out and these tiny little beds and cells, that still exists.
Yeah.
And the Empire is still throwing people in there. And I think that after the prison break scene, you have a sense of hope, obviously, of the fact that they did escape. But because the Empire is the Empire and it is a machine, of course, those still exist.
Yeah,
And
they're
they're
just
still
going to make
working.
security even more intense.
Yeah, and no one wins. No one wins. That's just to reiterate what I said before. This is just the ultimate no one wins when you're part of the fascist regime,
Mm-hmm.
right? Dedra's downfall, she's in a prison of her own making.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The very thing she swore to serve is what imprisoned her.
And she had she doesn't really. She never really did. But there was a glimpse of when Cyril was like, this is so wrong. There was a glimpse of you could get out, but she would never be able to get out.
No, she would never
And
make
this is
that.
her whole life.
She would never make that choice.
And this is her whole life. She grew up in an imperial block.
A kinder block, yeah.
Kinder block. Now she's in a cell block.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And then Cassian is on his walk. Where it's like all intercut with Cassian walking out to the hangar.
Putting
And
on
Cassian
his jacket.
putting on his jacket. He locks eyes with the Force healer.
She knows.
She knows.
She knows. She knows. Yeah, I think this was something I was also kind of questioning if we needed this in the last arc. And I think some of that I still hold true, but I think the payoff here is pretty good of this look between the two of them with the music going. And I watched it back a couple of times and it almost looks like he like nods at her.
I think so too.
And I still don't know. I don't think Cassian knows what's going to happen, but I think he perhaps has some sort of more belief in her now. I think she definitely knows what's going to be happening or that this is the time that he's been gathering for, basically. But I think that's kind of the beauty of Cassian's character is that he doesn't know what's going to happen, obviously, but he would still make all the same choices again, I think. Like if he did know how this was all going to end, he would still make those same choices. And so I don't think it really matters if he knows or not. I don't think he does, but he would still go forward. He would still go meet Tivik on Kafrene and start this journey. So I do think that I'm glad we had this payoff of him seeing the Force healer in this episode at the end. And it does really, it again, just heightens that ominous foreshadowing tone of everything that's going on here. And specifically the music when the U-Wing takes off is just so rip your heart out. I don't know how to describe it, but I was like, I need this to be over because I'm at the end of my rope right now.
It's too much. I think when Cassian sees the Force healer, I just was reminded of what she had said to him about thanking him for that clarity.
Yeah.
And so I think that is what they share right there is she has clarity of his sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that he also has clarity of his sense of purpose too.
I think so too. And I think we should also remember that he doesn't hear the Force healer describe him as a messenger. She says that to Bix. And I don't even know if Bix tells Cassian.
Yeah.
And she doesn't in the scenes that we see of the two of them. And I bet she doesn't. I don't think she does either. And I think that's also part of what I was saying of it doesn't matter. Like Cassian would still make all of these same choices if he had the information or didn't. And that's part of what makes him a hero and a leader in the rebellion and his like ability to connect with people and to make them trust him. And he says, like, I'm just lucky. And he is lucky, but like he's charismatic. And that has taken him so far in being able to connect with people and be entrusted with their stories. And we don't always see him actually telling those stories back, but like here we do. And this is obviously the most important story of him telling that information to the Alliance about Luthen and the Death Star and Galen Erso and all of that. And now he's about to go and help Jyn actually send out that information, tell that message to the rest of the galaxy. It's a lot. And then we have the shot of Saw, and he's looking at the starfighter over Jeddah, which is what Mon Mothma was warning him. Star Destroyer over Jeddah, which is what Mon Mothma was warning him about earlier that he was kind of not wanting to listen to. The last thing we haven't talked about is that we do get a sister mention
I know. I wanted to devote a lot of time to this, honestly.
I'm so glad we had this. This is something
Me too.
I've been like beating the drum about for this whole season and previous to season 2 of really thinking we would actually get kind of full closure on the sister story. And we didn't, obviously. But one thing we did talk a ton about was that Cassian's story begins with his sister. And in a lot of ways, it ends with his sister too. Him having this dream about her and her calling him Casa in it, which is Cassian's true name. And as he's about to embark on like his true calling, I guess we could say, his final purpose in this life. And the day starts with a dream about his sister. And I think of course, I wish there had been kind of full closure, but I do think it's kind of perfect that it's this loose end that never gets tied up and that we'll never know the answer to, in the same way that Cassian will never know that he and Bix have a child out
Exactly.
there.
I think that's the actual connection.
Yeah, and that there is the tragedy in these ordinary lives, like Cassian, someone who's not like a Luke Skywalker, sacrificing everything, including those relationships, his sister and Bix and his child being obviously huge ones for him. So I was very glad to see this dream.
Me too. And also it starts with this like dripping of water that sounds like a ticking clock. And it's when Bale comes in to the apartment and K2 shakes him awake and is like, waking up humans is always so weird. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Honestly true.
None of us have a good reaction ever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that there's been so much conversation online about the sister story. And we were really adamant about wanting resolution here. But this is the resolution. The resolution is that there actually is no resolution.
Yeah.
And I think that's true about Cassian's story and a lot of his relationships too, is that there actually is no resolution. I've seen a lot of people talk about recently that Cassian never gets to say goodbye to anyone.
Yeah, I don't like that. It makes me sad.
I know, but it's true here with the sister. It started with never getting to say goodbye to the sister. He never gets to say goodbye to Marva, never gets to say goodbye to Bix. He never gets to say goodbye to the people that he's lost, never got to say goodbye to Luthen. Never got to say goodbye really to anyone. Not even Nemec, who he then takes on his manifesto. And I guess it's distributed by Cassian somehow. Or everyone throughout the rebellion. I don't know. That's a little bit of a question mark, but we know that the link there, or the original link, is Nemec gives it to Cassian. Actually gives it to Vel to give to Cassian.
Yeah.
All that to be said, I think that I just want to say that we spent a lot of time being like, the sister's the key to it all, blah, blah, blah. We didn't say the key to it all, okay? That was an exaggeration.
Though.
But we were like, the story starts here. And I do think, I will say, a criticism I have a little bit is I do kind of wish they expanded on that a little bit more. Okay? I do wish they did. But the fact that we have no resolution with it, I know is the point. So I was so happy that we got this flashback again with the sister, because if we didn't have that, I would feel like that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it would have been a bigger kind of miss for the series.
Yes. And I know that Marva says that there were no survivors on that planet. And I think there were no survivors. And I think that's it. But in the beginning, when he's in that club,
I don't know. There is a girl from Kenari who was at the club.
There's that hope there. But just that hope, I think, has carried Cassian through in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah.
But then we have Bix later saying something about how you couldn't find your sister.
Well, she says I don't need protecting. I'm not your sister. I'm not Marva.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it was really perfect to have him have this dream about her right at the end. My feeling is that he maybe hasn't thought about her in a while. And it's kind of like seeing your life flash before your eyes when you're near the end, which Cassian is. He just doesn't know it. And so it makes sense that he would have a dream about her at this point in his life again.
Yeah, I also think that there's a sort of spiritual and emotional line about him dreaming about a child too. And then later in the end, we see Bix with a baby.
Yeah.
I think I don't really have much to say beyond that, but I do think that there's a sort of a thematic tie there.
Yeah, I think so too.
I just am really grateful that we saw this bit.
Mhm.
We also have a scene that we did we comment on this last arc when Cassian wakes up and Bix is gone and he stands in the doorway with the arch
Yeah.
on Yavin, and he's in his pajamas and he looks around, he looks like a child, and he looks just like how he looked when he was on Kenari as a child.
Mhm.
And it really is the color choices in that house are similar to the clothing that I think they were wearing on Kenari.
Mhm. Yeah, and a very like forest-filled jungle kind of planet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reflective, it's parallel.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. And yeah, I just think hearing Casa's name one more time is really important too. Like, oh, this is who he
Yes.
is. His name is
Mhm.
Casa, and this is what he's done for the rebellion.
Ugh. God, this show was
Real
everything.
good. It's real good.
It's so good. And the intro into Rogue One too is perfect. And I'm standing by it. I think this is the boldest thing that Star Wars has ever done. I think Andor, it's said 1,000 times. I don't need to be another person to say it, but it's Star Wars' best, most insanely made show. It is so well written. It's unbelievable. I don't know how he got so lucky. It's truly the best show.
Mhm.
It's like we struggle to find some complaints.
Mhm.
Like it is crazy, and we are so lucky. And I feel like this journey, this is what I was saying in the beginning, the journey that we went through from the Rogue One announcement to Rogue One coming out to the Andor announcement to now, it's wow.
Yeah, I'm very sad to be saying goodbye to Cassian and like all of these characters, but especially him. You know, it's just we have been with him for so long. The show was first announced in 2018. You know, we have a long joke about it filming for 10 years, but it kind of has been in reality. And
Oh, it was announced in 2018. For some reason I remember it being in 2020.
no, the show was I'm pretty sure the show was announced in 2018.
All right.
And then yeah, because they were already filming in 2020, and so it was delayed.
Oh yeah.
Because of
God.
COVID. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just it's very sad to say goodbye to the character in kind of this way. And we're so lucky to have had Diego Luna as such like a huge part of this story and like in Star Wars for so long, you know, and like Tony Gilroy as well. And I don't know, I'm with you. It's such an incredible show, and it's had such a presence in Star Wars fandom for so long. And these characters have had that presence too, that it's going to be, it's sad that it's over. It's bittersweet, and we're at the end of it here, and I'm like, man, I wish I don't know. I wish we could start all over again with them.
Yeah, I know. It's like, let's just do it all again.
Let's run it back.
Run it back.
Yeah, but we do know there's going to be an Art of Andor book coming out, and I am also really hopeful that we'll get some kind of Blu-ray DVD situation for both seasons now that it's complete, and we'll get lots of behind the scenes features and things like that. Because we deserve it, and Andor deserves to have that out there in the world too.
Totally. Ugh, I can't believe it's over.
I know.
And since we're recording this May 11th, it's not over yet. But when you're listening to this, it's over.
It's over.
It's so over.
It's so over. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I
Me
love
neither.
the show. I love Cassian. He's been one of my favorites for a long time now, and yeah, it's done.
Do you have a favorite episode of season 2?
Oh, I don't know. This episode 12 is real good. I don't know if I have a favorite episode. I think I'll say episode 12 right now.
Okay.
Do you?
I think the Gorman Massacre is the best.
I think it is.
I don't know if that's my favorite.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it is. I think the Gorman Massacre is the whole arc is the best and hardest thing that Star Wars has put out. But it's hard to watch. Like, it's uncomfortable to watch as it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But
I really like the Mon Mothma escape too.
Yeah.
So the last arc to me, I think, was a real highlight. And then I honestly, this arc was incredible too. I think episode 10, I don't know. I can't pick a favorite. I
Yeah.
threw out the question there, and I don't know. I can't
I
pick a
said
favorite,
episode
but I do.
12. This is the last one we talked
Yeah,
about.
totally, totally. I think of these. The 10 is actually my favorite.
10 is great. 10 is incredible. I think that
Mhm.
Andor does so well these like long ending montages. I think the montage at the end of episode 3, season 1 is really when everyone was like,
Yes,
wow, okay.
I remember
The
that
reaction.
watching that.
Mhm.
No, I remember you and I having screeners watching it a month before everyone and being
Yeah.
like, oh, like absolutely like gagged
Yeah.
over how that ending really crystallized everything. And we were like, oh my God, this is something special.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Andor does that so well, and it's done it a couple of times throughout the series, and this one here at the end of episode 12 is like, damn, it's all happening, and here's kind of our last looks at all of these characters, and some of them we know what's coming next, and some of them we don't, and I still feel the same way about all of them.
Me too. Ugh,
I know.
it's over.
I know. I think, is there anything else we want to say?
Thank you, Tony Gilroy.
Yeah, thank you, Gilroy. Thank you, Diego Luna.
Thank you, Kathleen Kennedy, for greenlighting. Thank you, thank you. Like literally, I don't know what else to say. It's so good.
It's so good. Thank you, and thank you guys for listening to our coverage of Andor over the past 3 years. We obviously have loved the show, and we hope you have too. And we would love to know your thoughts on the series finale, if you turned on Rogue One right away, and how has it changed your viewing of Rogue One? And do you like where we kind of left everyone at the end here? We would love to know. Please tell us on Twitter /X at SkyTalkersPod, or our personal handles. Mine is at Caitlin and Plesher, and Charlotte's is at Clarity. We also have our Instagram, our TikTok, and our website at skytalkers.com. Those are all good places to find us. And if you have a couple seconds and would like to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would so appreciate that, as it helps other people find our show and join in on the conversation. And if you're looking for other ways to support us, you can head on over to our Patreon and check out our different reward tiers there.
I want to say a huge thank you to these patrons: Ben, Mercedes, Caroline, Greg, Jonah, Linda, Draconius Rex, Neil, Stephen, Nikki, Emily, GMO, Gary, Kat, Jenny, Carrie, Koval, TFL Donut, Jeremy, Swara, Brad, Savannah, Derek, Arzu, Blessed Cheesemaker, Adam, Z, Fifi, Kels, and Emma. Thank you so much for supporting us.
Yes, thank you so much. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
This has been a 58 Ember production. For more shows, please visit the 58 Ember channel, 58ember.com, or find us at 58 Ember Media on socials.